Jerry reached into his pocket, pulled out a letter, and the guest's face turned white. The chaos stopped. Because nobody knew that letter existed. The studio was already in full meltdown. Security had their hands on both guests. The audience was chanting, "Jerry! Jerry! Jerry!" at maximum volume. A chair had been knocked over. Makeup was smeared. Voices were screaming over each other in that signature Springer chaos that America tuned in to see every afternoon. And then Jerry Springer reached into his jacket pocket. The woman on stage, her name was Michelle, 32 years old, wearing a tight leopard print top, froze mid-scream. Her finger, which had been jabbing accusingly at the man across from her, slowly lowered. Her mouth stayed open but no sound came out. Because she recognized what Jerry was holding. The folded paper. Yellowed at the edges. The handwriting visible even from 10 feet away. Her legs gave out. She collapsed back into the bright blue guest chair, her face draining of all color in real time, visible to every camera, every audience member, every person watching at home. The man sitting across from her, Marcus, her ex-boyfriend, the reason she'd come on the show to expose his cheating and lies, stopped yelling too. He stared at the letter in Jerry's hand with an expression of complete confusion. The security guards, massive men in black t-shirts with security printed across their chests, let go of both guests and stepped back slightly, sensing something had shifted. Jerry stood in the center of the stage, holding the letter at chest height, his face showing that characteristic calm authority mixed with something else. Something harder. "Michelle," Jerry said, his voice cutting through the studio with surgical precision. "You want to tell Marcus what this is? Or should I?" Jerry raised his hand. The chanting stopped. The entire studio went silent. To understand what happened next, you need to understand what happened 48 hours earlier. Michelle Rodriguez had contacted the Jerry Springer show with a story producers couldn't resist. "My boyfriend cheated with my sister and I'm going to confront them both on live TV." Classic Springer territory. Guaranteed chaos. Easy booking. She'd flown in from Phoenix to Chicago for the taping. Arrived with her story rehearsed, her anger genuine, her desire for public confrontation absolute. She was ready to destroy Marcus on national television, expose every lie, humiliate him the way he'd humiliated her. What she didn't know was that Marcus had also contacted the show. 3 days before Michelle called, Marcus had reached out to a producer with his own version of events. He claimed Michelle had fabricated the entire cheating story to cover up something much darker. He had proof, he said. Evidence that would completely flip the narrative. The producer had done something unusual for Springer. She'd actually investigated. Made phone calls. Checked records. And what she found had gone straight to Jerry's desk that morning, 2 hours before taping. Jerry had read the file. Read it twice. Then he'd made a call to Phoenix, to an address Michelle thought nobody knew about. What Jerry didn't know was that she'd been sitting there since the beginning of the taping. A woman in the audience. Row 3, standing section, left side. 61 years old. Gray hair pulled back. Hands gripping the railing so hard her knuckles were white. She'd been watching Michelle scream at Marcus for 15 minutes, watching her daughter perform this public execution, and she'd been crying silently the entire time. Jerry had spotted her during the commercial break. Made eye contact. Nodded once. The woman had nodded back. And now Jerry was holding the letter that would destroy everything Michelle had built. This letter, Jerry continued, his voice steady, measured, was written 15 years ago. By someone who loved you very much. Someone who made a choice that has haunted them every single day since. Michelle's hands were shaking. Jerry, I don't know what. Yes, you do. Jerry interrupted, his tone sharp enough to cut. You know exactly what this is. The question is whether you're going to keep lying or whether you're finally going to tell Marcus the truth. Marcus stood up from his chair. What the hell is going on? What letter? What truth? The audience was dead silent. No chanting. No screaming. Just 300 people holding their breath. Jerry took one step toward Michelle. Then he stopped. Because he noticed what she was holding. Her left hand had moved to her purse. Not aggressively. Protectively. Like she was checking to make sure something was still there. You still carry it, don't you? Jerry said quietly. The photograph. Michelle's eyes filled with tears. Please, she whispered. Please don't. Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most powerful part of this story is still ahead. Marcus, Jerry said, turning to face the confused man. Michelle didn't bring you here to expose you for cheating. She brought you here because she's been lying to you for your entire relationship. About something that happened before you even met. What are you talking about? Marcus demanded. 15 years ago. Jerry continued. Michelle got pregnant. She was 17. The father was her high school boyfriend. And she made a decision. Michelle was sobbing now, her makeup running, her whole body shaking. She gave the baby up for adoption. Jerry said. A little girl. Born March 15, 1989. And she's been carrying the guilt of that decision ever since. The audience gasped. Not the excited gasp of scandal. Something deeper. More human. Marcus sat down slowly, the anger draining from his face. You had a baby? I was 17. Michelle choked out. I had no money. No support. My mother threw me out. I had no choice. But that's not the whole story, is it, Michelle? Jerry's voice was gentle now but insistent. Because something happened 5 years ago that changed everything. Michelle looked up at Jerry with desperate eyes. How do you know about that? Jerry held up the letter again. Because the person who wrote this letter told me everything. He turned toward the audience. Specifically toward row 3, left side, where the gray-haired woman was still gripping the railing, tears streaming down her face. Would you like to come down here? Jerry asked softly. The woman nodded, unable to speak. Security helped her navigate down from the audience platform. The studio stayed silent as she walked across the stage, her steps shaky, her face crumpling with emotion. Michelle saw her coming and let out a sound that wasn't quite a scream and wasn't quite a sob. Mom? The gray-haired woman, Linda Rodriguez, who had thrown her pregnant 17-year-old daughter out of the house 15 years ago, stood 5 feet from Michelle, tears pouring down her weathered face. I'm sorry, Linda whispered. I'm so sorry, Mija. I was wrong. I was so wrong. Behind the scenes, Jerry made a decision that no producer had ever seen him make before. The control room was in chaos. Producer Jenny Marcus was screaming into her headset. What is Jerry doing? This isn't the show. Where's the confrontation? Where's the fight? Director Tom Brennan stared at the monitors, watching Jerry Springer facilitate something that looked more like family therapy than a talk show. I don't know, he said quietly. But don't cut. Keep rolling. On stage, Jerry had pulled over a third chair. Linda sat down across from Michelle, the two women separated by 15 years of silence and regret. Marcus, still processing, stood awkwardly to the side. 5 years ago, Jerry continued, addressing the audience now, his voice taking on that tone he used for final thoughts. Michelle hired a private investigator to find her daughter. She learned that the little girl, now 12 years old, had been adopted by a family in Wisconsin. Good people. Loving parents. The girl was thriving. Michelle nodded, unable to speak. And Michelle made another impossible choice, Jerry said. She decided not to contact her. Not to disrupt the life her daughter had built. She decided that loving her daughter meant leaving her alone. The audience was crying now. Even the security guards looked affected. But the guilt was eating her alive. Jerry continued. So she created this elaborate story about Marcus cheating. She brought him here to destroy the relationship. Because she didn't think she deserved to be happy. She thought she deserved to be punished. Marcus took a step toward Michelle. Is this true? Michelle nodded, sobbing. I love you. But I don't deserve you. I gave away my baby. What kind of person does that? A 17-year-old kid with no options, Marcus said, his voice breaking. That's what kind. Jerry held up the letter again. Linda wrote this letter to Michelle 10 years ago. Right after she found out about the adoption. She tried to mail it, but Michelle had moved. Changed her address. Disappeared. He handed the letter to Michelle. Your mother has been trying to find you for a decade. To tell you that she was wrong. That she's sorry. That she wants to be part of your life again. Michelle took the letter with shaking hands. Unfolded it. Read the first line. My beautiful daughter, I threw you away when you needed me most. She couldn't read any further. She looked up at her mother, at Linda, who was reaching across the space between them with trembling hands. But this is the moment no one in the studio, and no one watching at home, ever saw coming. Jerry did something he'd never done in 27 years of hosting the show. He turned to the cameras and said, Cut the feed. The director's voice came through Jerry's earpiece. Jerry, we're live. We can't. Cut it, Jerry said firmly. Now. The red recording lights on the cameras went dark. Jerry looked at Michelle and Linda. You two need a moment without 300 people watching. Take 5 minutes. We'll wait. He gestured to the audience. Everybody stay quiet. Give them this. The studio stayed silent as Michelle stood on shaky legs and took 3 steps toward her mother. Linda met her halfway. They collided in an embrace that broke something open. 15 years of separation. 15 years of guilt and shame and regret. All of it pouring out in that studio in front of strangers who had come for chaos and stayed for something real. Marcus stood watching, tears on his face. Then he walked over and wrapped his arms around both of them. Jerry stepped back, giving them space. His face was set in that controlled expression he'd mastered over decades. But his eyes were wet. 5 minutes later, the cameras came back on. Michelle was sitting between her mother and Marcus, all 3 of them holding hands. Her makeup was destroyed. Her hair was a mess. She looked wrecked and exhausted, and somehow lighter than she looked at the beginning of the show. Jerry sat down in his chair for final thought. Look, he said to the cameras, his voice taking on that distinctive rhythm. We do a lot of crazy shows here. People throw chairs. Security breaks up fights. We've seen it all. But every once in a while, something real happens. Something that reminds us that behind all the screaming and the chaos, there are real people carrying real pain. He looked at Michelle. You thought you didn't deserve happiness because you made an impossible choice at 17. But loving your daughter meant making sure she had a good life, even if it meant you couldn't be in it. That's not something to be punished for. That's called being a parent. He turned to Linda. And you spent 10 years trying to fix a mistake. Trying to find your daughter and tell her you were sorry. That takes courage. Then he addressed Marcus. And you just found out that the woman you love has been carrying this weight alone. Now you get to choose what kind of man you are. The kind who runs, or the kind who stays. Marcus squeezed Michelle's hand. I'm not going anywhere. The audience erupted. Not in chaos. In applause. Standing. Crying. Even the security guards were clapping. Jerry stood up, walked over to Michelle, and did something else he rarely did. He hugged her. Then he hugged Linda. Take care of yourselves, Jerry said, looking directly into the camera. And each other. Share and subscribe, so this story will never be forgotten. After the taping, Jerry kept the letter. He had it framed and hung it in his dressing room with a small note. Sometimes the chaos is a cry for help. The episode never aired. The network thought it was too soft for Springer. But everyone who was in that studio that day never forgot it. 3 production assistants independently confirmed what happened. One kept a detailed diary entry. The footage was erased, but the story lived on. Michelle and Linda reconciled. Marcus and Michelle got married 2 years later. And at their wedding, sitting in the front row, was a 14-year-old girl from Wisconsin who had reached out to Michelle after turning 18 and learning she was adopted. Sometimes the person you need to forgive is yourself.